Okay. Just waiting to see if this thing actually starts. You know how it be lately. Okay, this thing can move. What are you doing? Oh, it just updated. Why does it want to update again? My phone is wanting to update again. Stop. I'm trying to do a thing here. I don't care about updating right now. I'm trying to do a thing. Stop. Just get out of my way. I'm wearing this Captain America t-shirt again. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and open up the last of our original sketch, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures today. And this is, of course, Raphael. We've already opened Leonardo, Donatello, and Michelangelo, which make up the crew with one other fellow, Raphael, who is not the leader of the group, but he was transformed from the Norm by the nuclear goop. And, of course, this is based on this particular drawing of the boys. The first drawing ever done of all four of them together. So that's why it's called the original sketch, although this was the actual original sketch of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle by Kevin Eastman. And then Peter Laird was so amused by it, he had to do his own take on it. Maybe there was a little bit of a one-upsmanship going on in where they're the two gentlemen there. And I've read this before, but we'll read it again. Long ago in Dover, New Hampshire, two upstart comic artists passed the time making each other laugh. Kevin Eastman sketched an unlikely combination of ninja and turtle, and Peter Laird answered back with his own version. Before long, a new sketch emerged of all four teenage brothers ready for action, and the rest, as they say, is history. So you're supposed to be able to fit all four of these together to make a tableau resembling that original sketch. And you can see I've already opened the other three boys, so they're waiting on Raphael to join them. He's lagging behind. Damn! But Raphael figure based on the original sketch includes original sketch reprint and display stand, as all four of them do. And then I think that's everything we need to see on this box. There's the bottom of it for anybody who wants to see the bottom of it. And I do want to point out again, I do like that early The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles logo, which they would drop the definite article when it became an actual comic book. Speaking of which, just pointing it out again, I'd gotten this in a box set from Amazon, all four of them together, and that's what that box looked like. And that came with a comic book, which, despite the cover, which replicates the cover of the Donatello micro series, it's not just the Donatello micro series. It also has the Raphael micro series in there. So this is a great comic because it's got two of the micro series in here, which are both quite good. So definitely worth checking those comics out if you haven't before. Anyway, I've already cut the tape on this guy, so let's go ahead and get it open. Finally get on to my favorite of the four Ninja Turtles. And, of course, he comes with a slew of accessories. But let's get that base out of there first. Now, Michelangelo and Leonardo are the only ones who come with unique bases. Leonardo's is the one that goes in front, and it has a man-cold cover on it. And Michelangelo's is the one that goes in the back, and it has a crate with a plank on it so that Michelangelo can stand on it, and he won't be hidden by the other boys. You know, again, in the sketch here, you see Michelangelo's kind of leaping into the air, so they gave him a base to stand on to kind of replicate that look. But Raphael and Donatello both share the same mold for their base. You see it says Raph and Don on there. So there we go. Go ahead and set that aside for the moment. But yeah, theirs doesn't have anything special about it. It's just some asphalt. And then the base for the sketch card, of course, we've got that again, which looks like a big old puddle of mutagen with the shattered remains of the vial in it. And then what would Raphael be without his Psi? Any Raphael action figure that's worth anything should come with some Psi, right? I'm looking at you, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Dennis Lepetrov is here, and he says hello right back. And there are the Psi. They're nice looking Psi, but they're going to be a little narrow for this figure. He's not going to be able to fit the Psi in between the fingers like I like for a Raphael figure to do. But we'll see what that looks like in a minute. And then, last but not least, he comes with Raphael's distinctive katana blade that, Raphael should always come with a katana. What? Raphael comes with a katana blade? What? Huh? How did that happen? Well, again, if we look at this original sketch, you'll see that Raphael actually does have a katana blade on his belt. So I guess that was an idea that was abandoned, and they decided that the boys should just have their own unique weapons, and that only Leonardo should be the one who has katanas, and Raphael would just have the Psi. Now, I've mentioned before, in the many times I've talked about Ninja Turtles on here, that Eastman and Laird were very much influenced by Daredevil, which was a very popular comic at the time, drawn by Frank Miller. So this was like peak Daredevil. To me, Daredevil begins and ends with Frank Miller. Like that's it. That's what Daredevil is. I mean, like, I don't mean any disrespect to people who came before or people who came after. I got a lot of respect for people like Gene Colan and Ann Nesenti, and Carl Kiesel wrote a really fun run on Daredevil that I really enjoyed back in the 90s. But to me, the absolute peak of Daredevil is Frank Miller. That's just all there is to it. And when you got people who worked on Daredevil, like, Gene Colan and Wally Wood, Wally Wood, the dude who I might call the greatest comic book artist of all time. He's definitely a contender. Like there's Jack Kirby, there's Neil Adams, there's Wally Wood, like those guys, and Will Eisner. I mean, like, there's a lot of guys I would consider to be the greatest comic book artists of all time that I would think would be worthy of that title. Wally Wood is one of them. But even still, Frank Miller's Daredevil is way better than Wally Wood's Daredevil. I'm just saying. Now, Frank Miller's Daredevil wouldn't exist without Wally Wood's Daredevil, so he definitely deserves his props and his respects. But Frank Miller was the guy who saw the potential of Daredevil as a character and really refined him and made him the great character that he's. The Frank Miller Daredevil is what made Daredevil the Daredevil that we know today. That's what I'm saying. So anyway, Daredevil was a really popular comic at that time, and one of the most popular characters in that comic was created by Frank Miller, and her name was Elektra, assassin. I remember the Bill Sienkiewicz. I always have a hard time with that guy's name. Bill Sienkiewicz illustrated and Frank Miller wrote the Elektra Assassin miniseries, and that's awesome. That's like some of the greatest comics ever made right there, and the artwork is just gorgeous. But yeah, they were big fans of Frank Miller's Daredevil, and they decided to use some elements of that when they were doing that. And Elektra's main weapons, her distinctive weapons were the Psi. So they borrowed that for one of their boys, and it turned out it was Raphael. So yeah, there we go. So I'm not going to have him pose holding this katana, but I do think it's cool that he comes with this katana, because it's a detail that I had actually never noticed in this picture before, is that he has this. And I thought it was, oh yeah, he does have a sword in there. How about that? When I saw it. And if we give him the sword, now he looks kind of like the original comic book version of Leonardo, doesn't he? With the red mask. And how they originally all had red bandanas like that. But there's your look at Raphael with a katana. Now, when I was a kid, And I read the comic book before I saw the cartoon or saw the toys or anything like that. But when I was a kid and I saw the original Playmates toys, and this is not the original Playmates Raphael, this is the remastered version from the Target set that we opened up a while back, but he looks pretty much like that one. I had an idea to take the original Raphael, buy like 3 extra ones and 3 extra of the other boys, and then just put all their weapons onto Raphael bodies, and then I would have comic book accurate Ninja Turtle figure. I never got around to it, but then I would have comic book accurate Ninja Turtle figures. God, I was always a nerd, wasn't I? But he does look really cool with the sword. And I kind of like the idea that maybe Raphael could have the sword as like a backup weapon, or maybe he took this off of a Foot Clan member after he killed him. Because the boys didn't play around in those early comics. They would kill their enemies. They were straight up ninjas. So you can peg the sword into his belt there, so he can have that in there for storage. Just like in that original sketch, since it doesn't show him wielding the sword in that either. And then, of course, he has his sai. Now, we could definitely get the sai into his hands as, as holding him by the handle in kind of the more standard way. And you can see here he's got him held, underhanded, so he can make stabby a little easier. And here on this part of the package, they do have him with the handle of the sai in between his fingertips, which of course is how he's shown on the sketch, with the sai handle kind of in between his fingertips. So I'm hoping he can at least do that. The other one, he's got it kind of, again, he's got the handle kind of between his fingers, but more sort of like that, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull off that pose, so I'll probably just have that underhanded. I think they probably just have that underhanded in this picture too. Yeah, and his hands turned at kind of an angle to hide that fact. But I gotta say this in defense of Playmates for not having so that his sai can fit in between his fingers, as I usually enjoy, is these are some massive turtle mitts. He's got huge hands, and they would have had to make the sai like really big and really wide to get that to work. When you're drawing a picture like that, you can kind of fake it. You can kind of take some artistic liberties, and you don't necessarily have to adhere to physics and having to fit a thicker object into a narrower space is not a problem. You just draw it. Just draw it that way. But, when you're talking about an action figure, which is like a physical thing. So Raphael does have that kind of texture to his skin, like these guys have. It's not like the original remastered figures that everybody seemed to hate that. I don't have those original remastered figures, so I can't speak on that. But it is like a subtle sort of leathery reptilian texture. This is probably how, if I was going to do if Playmates was going to do new figures of the 1990 Ninja Turtles, I'd probably suggest them the live action one. I would probably suggest they do something like that. But I don't know if it's going to come across here, but there's like a bigger sort of pockmark right here on his nose, and I almost kind of think that's almost like a battle scar or something like that. But let's see if I can get that sai into his hand with the handle in between his fingertips. And his fingers are kind of rigid. And I think the hardest part is actually going to be getting the sai around his thumb, because even the thumb is kind of thick at that angle. I mean, the fingers are wider than they are thick. You see what I'm saying? But he still has a pretty thick thumb. It might be the sort of thing where I might have to heat it up with a hairdryer to get it in there properly. But I don't think he's going to be able to hold it right. But I do have some of these guys actually can hold the sai like that. So we're gonna see that in a minute when I do some comparisons. I'll go ahead and I've got them posed like that in some versions. I don't think I'm going to be able to fit it in there like that. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. So I can kind of, if I turn it this way, there is space you can see where I can fit that handle in between the fingertips. I can actually kind of, you got to kind of widen it out some. Let's see, maybe if I try to put the thumb in and swing it around. I don't want to bend this side out of shape too much, but I definitely don't want to put any stress marks onto it. So I got it into the hand the way that they've got it posed. And of course, he would have it pointing out this way. And it's the opposite hand, of course. But that's about as well as I can do that. And you can see that that's actually bending the sai out of shape. So I would not want to leave that in that position for too long. So they gave it the old college try. They tried to get it, but they didn't quite get it. And like I said, these hands, they're ginormous. And the fingers are like huge. And I kind of don't blame them for not being able to get it 100% in the position that it probably should be in for that sketch. I think they did the best they could. So I'm not going to be too harsh in judging them. Your mileage may vary. You might be like, Playmates are sons of bitches, and like be like really mad about it, but I'm not that mad about it. So Raphael has basically the same body as like Donatello, in that he doesn't have any wristbands like Michelangelo has, and he doesn't have any knee pads like Leonardo has. So I think he's pretty much the same as Donatello from the neck down, and he's got his own facial expression. Much like with Michelangelo, you can see Raphael's entire face facing forward, so you can see he's got those gritted teeth. So this might be even the same head that Michelangelo has. I haven't compared. It's kind of ironic that they would want Michelangelo and Raphael to have the same facial expression, since those are the ones who are, I think, kind of most polar opposite in terms of personality, because you got one that's just kind of angry all the time. And you got one that's just kind of chill and fun-loving all the time. But it still works. It still works, I think. But anyway, Raphael, if you don't want him to be holding his sai, he does have storage for those because he's got two small loops in the front of his belt. And this is something where they did take some liberties. This is not something that's on the original sketch. But you got to give Raphael a way to hold his sai. I suppose they could have put it on the back and, hidden it that way. But then you've already got the katana blade back there. And I suppose they could have made it so that you could fit the sai through his belt, and indeed you can tuck the sai into his belt. It does actually fit in there, and that reminds me a lot of how it would just kind of be on the comic book, where he just kind of have it hanging off of his belt. I can't quite get it on there like quite 100% the way they did it in the comic, because really this part of the handle should be under the belt and this part of the handle should be over it. But still, it reminds me of the way that he stored his sai in the comic book. But I suppose it's the sort of thing where they figure, even though these aren't technically figures that are made for kids, they're still, like I said, figures you could give to a kid. They're kid safe. Like a kid could play with these and be fine. And I think kids would actually really like this design. I think they would appreciate the cartooniness of it. But a kid wouldn't know to do that. And like, if you're a smart kid like I was, I don't want to brag, but I did peak too early. If you're a smart kid like I was, you might figure out how to do that anyway. But, most kids, I think, would need to have kind of a bespoke place to put those sai. And even if, I, being a smart kid at the time, even if I had to figure it out, I can just stick it in between his belt, I still would have thought to myself, but it would have been nice if they'd have given me an actual loop to put the sai into. So to hold him next to the remastered figure, because we're going to use that to represent our original Raphael, even though it's not this. You can see how they tried to copy the colors of the of the original figure fairly closely. This one's pretty much identical to the original figure. You can see that this one, the skin color, and this is something that, from what I understand, I don't really have any other reproduction figures from Playmates. From what I understand, with Raphael, they seem to have a really hard time of capturing the skin color. I think they almost have it here. Like if I didn't have them next to each other and I was just looking at this guy, I'd be like, yeah, that's what I remember his color as being. But holding him next to this guy, then you can really see it, because this Raphael has a lot more of a yellowish cast to his green, whereas this one is a little more sort of pale, almost kind of washed out looking next to this one. And I don't even think that this is the worst reproduction of Raphael's skin color. I think there are some other ones that are worse that I've seen online that Playmates has done. But I think it's close enough for this figure, which isn't really supposed to be the original toy anyway. It's supposed to be a new toy, and they just kind of colored it in a similar way to the original toy as an homage. This is a version of the boys that we've never seen in action figure form before, at least as far as I know. Is I want to say like the earliest versions that we've seen of them up to this point would have been, the I don't know if the NECA figures came out that were the actual original sketches at that point. I don't remember, but the first one we would have seen, the earliest one we would have seen, would have been this guy, the Mirage Raphael, and of course mine's a bootleg. I have the bootleg set, but I kind of think that the bootleg set is actually superior in a few ways. Like the hands are better, for example. They only have one set of hands, but it's a better set of hands, so I'm not going to complain. And this version of Raphael just has kind of like space on the side of his shell where you can store his weapons. But you can see NECA was able to engineer it just fine, but their hands are a bit smaller in proportion, and a bit smaller just period, like not even in proportion. But you can see again the NECA hands are much smaller than these hands, these giant mitts. And like I said, they kind of redesigned the boys a little bit in between there. Here they were supposed to be more sort of cartoony and more sort of like, I guess, like an underground comic or a Looney Tunes or something like that. Like I've mentioned in the other videos how this design of the turtles reminds me a lot of the Looney Tunes Tortoise Beats Hare, where Bugs Bunny was in an adaptation of Tortoise of the Hare. It reminds me of that design of a turtle. And like I don't know if it's I'm not saying it's identical. I haven't seen that cartoon in decades, but as I remember it, that's kind of what I remember the turtle is looking like in that version. So yeah, you can almost imagine these being the same exact versions as this. You can almost imagine looking at Raphael. The skin color is close enough. The colors just in general are close enough. You can almost imagine this being like when the boys turned 13. So when they first literally became teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This would be a couple of years later, 15, 16, around that time. You could almost imagine that. Head over Diecast is here and says, cool, alive. Yep, you made it. Congratulations. And then one other that I wanted to compare to was another bootleg that I have, which is the movie star style bootlegs. And I might do a video talking about these. You can still get movie star bootlegs on Amazon, but I think it's a different set from what I have. I think my set is actually a little bit better. And like I said, I got this set. It must have been like over 10 years ago at this point. I think the Nickelodeon show had just started. It was right before that first Michael Bay movie came out that they first started making these. But I think that the ones that I have are a little bit more high quality than the ones they make now. I think they got kind of lazy about it. But again, he's colored very similar to the original Raphael figure. And you can see that with these ones, they colored in the knee pads and the elbow pads and the wristbands to match the bandanas. So... And he's actually got painted versions of the original weapons, which I don't think these are very accurate Sai. I wish they'd have given him more movie accurate Sai, but these are more like actual knife blades than Sai are kind of more like metal rods. And I guess you can sharpen them at the end, but they're not really blades necessarily. Sean Franklin is here and he says hi. Hi right back, Sean Franklin. Hope you're doing well. But yeah, this is a pretty cool figure, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I like all of these figures, and I like the uniqueness of them, and the fact that it's a design of the turtles that's from before even the comic book came out, and that's really cool. That gives us like a design of these guys that we haven't ever seen before in any context in terms of like action figures. So I'm going to go ahead and try to pose Raphael as close to that sketch as I can get him. And I don't know how successful I'm going to be because it looks like this leg kind of bends straight out, but he's not going to be able to have that leg straight out because he doesn't have any ankle articulation at all. You know what? I forgot to talk about articulation. So we should talk about articulation real quick, and then I'll get him into this pose. I'm going to take the weapons all off of him so I don't have anything encumbering him. And I'm going to have to put those Psi into his hands anyway. So Raphael can look down about that far, look up about that far. Head rotates all the way around. Doesn't have any side-to-side movement because this is actually on a swivel here. It pivots like that. Not a true ball joint. The arms rotate all the way around, but he's got those giant turtle hands. They're going to kind of bump into his face a little bit. Head over to Diecast says, "What do you mean bootleg? Is it a fake? This one? Yeah, this is absolutely a bootleg. This is absolutely a bootleg. And my NECA Ninja Turtles. Where did I put him? Where did my Raphael go? I don't want to lose my NECA Raphael. I love it so much. That's like my favorite. Yeah, here he is. There he is. Yeah, these are bootlegs. They're very high quality bootlegs. I've talked about these on another video, but apparently the legend is that these were bootlegs that were made by factory employees at the factory that actually made the NECA toys using the actual molds. And they did a run of these, and I think they're still making them because they're still plentiful to find online. But they did a run of these where they all had the red bandanas, and then they did a run of these where they had the multicolored bandanas. And so if you've got NECA figures where like Leonardo has a blue bandana, Michelangelo has an orange bandana, etc., those are definitely bootlegs. But even if you have the red bandanas, what you want to do is check the hands. And if their hands are like the same color plastic as the rest of their arms, that's a bootleg. NECA used this kind of weird rubbery plastic on the hands that kind of discolors over time, which is why I was saying the bootlegs are actually better in some ways. So, but anyway, I was talking about the articulation on this guy, so I better get back to that. Sorry, I got distracted again. So he's got a single joint of articulation at the elbow, bends almost 90 degrees, but not quite. These are like the anatomy of the figures gets in the way of the articulation with these guys. And then the forearm rotates all the way around. The wrist rotates all the way around. He can only kick up. He's got these weird hip joints. I don't like these hip joints. Playmates keeps giving the remastered figures have these hip joints, and I don't like them. I would much rather have like just ball joints. But he can kick up about that far, and you can see like what I think is the worst problem with these figures is the feet are all hollowed out. I don't like that at all. And then he's got a single joint of articulation at the knee, which bends about 90 degrees. There we go. And that rotates all the way around. And there's absolutely no articulation below the knee. He does not have any cankle articulation. His cankles are just going to be stuck like that. You're going to have to deal with your boys having cankles because that's just the way that they were designed in that original drawing. They're like just all got cankles. See? No, it's like a little triangle, like a little ice cream cone shape coming out of his knee. And man, his legs are all twisted around, like right out of the package. Like I don't think that. So I'm trying to get him into the into a pose that's somewhat reminiscent of the pose in the sketch, but I'm not going to be able to get that leg to be as straight just because of the way that these legs are designed. But I think that's probably about as good as I'm going to get it. And like I said, I'm not going to be able to get him to hold the Psi the way that it's pictured in the drawing. That's just not going to happen. But I can kind of fit it up into his hand like that if I have it underhanded like that. So that's cool. I think that that'll look good as his pose for that hand anyway. But as far as getting him to hold the sai like he's holding it with the handle over his face like that, actually it looks like they got the I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. So we're just going to basic bitch it and put his sai into his hands like that. That's probably going to be about as close as I'm going to be able to get it to his image on that original sketch. But I think that looks pretty cool like that. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. That's a good action pose right there. Now, I would have liked to have been able to fit the sai in between his fingertips. I would have liked to have been able to get him to hold the sai, in any which position. But unfortunately, it's just not going to be doable with this guy because it's not Playmates' fault. With the design they were working with, there's only so much they could do. Now, again, like Playmates is able to do this with other figures, like the 2012 Nickelodeon Raphael can do it, and this guy can do it. Which even with the older style of hands, these are hands that aren't too different from. I bet I could put these into a vintage Raphael hand, and he could hold them like this. It's more with the design of the sai. The design of the sai on the original figures was not that great. I'm sorry to tell you. I'm sorry for anybody out there watching it who's wanting me to sing the praises of the original line, and I do love the original line. See, I can get him to hold the sai like that with the handle between the fingertips. That works. But it's all with the design of the sai, and even then, this is a pretty good sai design. But it's just not quite. It's just not quite going to happen, is the thing. So, and of course, when you saw the NECA version, on the NECA version, that one was able to hold the size in a few different positions. So I got a few things going on with these sais, and I think he looks really cool. Again, these are my favorite Ninja Turtle action figures of all time. So, it's like, of course, I'm just going to sing their praises from the sewers to the rooftops. But yeah, this guy is still really great. I still really like this figure, despite the fact that I can't quite get his legs straightened out enough to recreate the pose, and the fact that I can't quite get the sai in the hands the right way to mimic that pose. I still think they did a really great job with this figure, and I'm still really happy with it. And all four of these figures are great, and you got to get all four of them so you can display all four of them together. And of course, I'm going to have a picture of that. I'll make sure to put that in the community posts later on so you guys can see that. So we are once again finished with another iteration of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that doesn't mean that we're done with Ninja Turtles. We still got more Ninja Turtles to go. I just got these guys the other day. I ordered them off of AliExpress, and the typical AliExpress quality that I expect right there is a couple of these boxes were crushed. Raphael's box was crushed beyond recognition. It was horrible. And they looked like there was even pieces missing. I had to open that one up and confirm that the pieces had just fallen deep into the bubble. But I'll talk more about that later. But next episode, yes, we're going to get into one of my, if not my most favorite version of these characters, the 1990 live action movie, which I think is definitely the I think is definitely my favorite version of these characters. I think that this is the one where they kind of took some things that worked from the cartoon and took everything else from the comic book, and they were able to make a version of the boys that is a chef's kiss, like absolute favorite. There've been some other versions since that I've enjoyed. Like I said, I liked the Nickelodeon, the 2012 cartoon. I liked that one. I think it was 2002. That cartoon was pretty good. I liked that one. But to me, this is kind of like this is kind of peak Ninja Turtles. And this is also like when they were the peak in popular culture. The Ninja Turtles ruled the world at this point. So everybody was saying Kawabunga, dude. But yeah, next episode, I'll be back and we're going to open up Michelangelo. Once again, we're going to start with Michelangelo, Donatello, Leonardo, and then Raphael, because that's just, it's worked for me so far. Why don't we just keep going with that? So if you want to make sure you don't miss that episode, and I'm pretty sure these are bootlegs too. They actually have Nickelodeon logos and NECA logos and everything on there. They're being kind of brazen about it, but I'm pretty sure these are bootlegs, and I'll talk more about why I'm 99% sure that they're bootlegs. But hint, I ordered it off of AliExpress. That's the short version, but I'll give a more detailed version of like, here's some things that tell me it's a bootleg once we get to that. But if you want to make sure you don't miss that episode, and I promise I'll wear a different t-shirt for the next episode. I just grabbed whatever t-shirt I had and by hand, and it was this one. So make sure you like, subscribe, all the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Raphael and the boys in this format. And like I said, it's a really cool figure, and it's very unique just because of the version of Raphael that it is. Hell, he comes with a katana sword. How many versions of Raphael do you have that come with a katana sword? Not many. I'm going to tell you that right now. This might be the only one. I don't know. I know they did some Ninja Turtles 3. NECA did some Ninja Turtles 3 figures, and he might have a katana on his samurai sword, his samurai armor somewhere. I don't know. I don't have those, but they are pretty cool. I talk a lot of smack about Part 3, but I'm not gonna lie, it was cool to see the boys in the samurai armor. I thought that was really neat. So anyway, what's the price? The price on these guys was, I got the whole set for $25 on Amazon, and I got a hell of a deal on that. Now, I don't think that they're $25 anymore. I think last time I checked, the price had gone up to $55, but I think that's probably what the actual retail on these is. If it's $55, that's a little closer. Now these, I got the whole set for $30. So yeah, if you're getting a whole set of NECA figures for $30, I think that's probably a bootleg. That's either a bootleg or somebody's ex-girlfriend is selling his stuff. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Please make sure you like and subscribe. YouTube likes it when I say like and subscribe, so I like to say like and subscribe. Please leave a comment down below. I like it when you leave comments. Let me know what you think about these figures and the characters in general, and especially Raphael, because this is his video. So he's going to be upset if you start talking about how much you love Michelangelo in the Raphael video. He's not going to like that. And you know this guy's got a bit of a temper, so you might not want to push him. Head over to Diecast says, been there. Haven't we all? Anyway, we will talk to you next time. Bye.